Back in the heady days of 2002, I was still a young and optimistic teenager, instead of the horrifying burned out husk of a man you see today, and I was flicking through the TV channels one day when I caught a commercial for a new show called Firefly on the Sci-Fi Channel, made by that guy who did Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now, I really like Buffy, but I have to admit, this Firefly thing didn't really grab me. It looked like some weird mashup of cowboy movies and the kind of low-budget sci-fi action shows that were all the rage at the time, and I remember thinking, I don't get it. This looks weird and silly, and I don't know if I'm meant to take it seriously or laugh at it. And because I already had Farscape and Stargate SG-1 and Star Trek Enterprise to keep me occupied, Firefly just kind of passed me by. And by the end of the year, it had been cancelled anyway, so who cares? Just another aborted sci-fi show with grand ideas that never really got off the ground. Guess I dodged a bullet with that one, eh? Now, I'm telling you all this because people like me are the exact reason why Firefly never found the audience it needed and got unceremoniously cancelled by a network that never really believed in it in the first place. But having finally caved in and watched it with Mahler like 20 years too late, I can honestly say that is now a genuinely big regret on my part. Why? Because Firefly is a fucking awesome show with some of the best character work I've ever seen in a project like this, a fully fleshed out world of adventure and vibrant cultures brimming with potential, writing that's light years ahead of the dull, flaky sludge we're subjected to today, a cast of superb actors at the top of their game, and most importantly, a genuine passion from everyone involved that you can feel in every single scene and conversation. They really were trying to create something special with this show, even though seemingly everything was working against them, and there's something truly admirable about that kind of glorious failure. The show is set a few hundred years into the future, where humanity's formed a single world government called the Alliance and spread out into the galaxy to colonize nearby star systems. Some of these tried to break away from Alliance control, which resulted in a galactic civil war that the separatists, known as Browncoats, ultimately lost. Now the outer colonies exist in an uneasy peace, where technology and culture have devolved into a kind of Wild West frontier mentality, and law and order is maintained by whoever has the biggest guns. It's in this world of danger and possibilities that we're introduced to Malcolm Reynolds, a former browncoat turned smuggler, and his ragtag crew who live and work with him aboard the Serenity. They spend their days taking on dangerous jobs that other people won't do, transporting illegal cargo, trying to avoid Alliance patrols and the cannibalistic space pirates known as Reavers, all so that they can scrape together enough money to keep the beat up Serenity running. But things take a sudden change for Malcolm and the others when they're hired by a young doctor to transport his sister River, who's on the run from the Alliance and is, well, a bit strange to put it mildly. Clearly there's more to her than meets the eye, and as the season unfolds, the crew begin to realise that River might just hold the key to changing the balance of power in the colonies. Now, as I'm describing it here, it probably sounds like a fairly generic space adventure show, the kind of thing you've probably seen a million times before, but the devil, as always, is in the detail, and this is where Firefly really comes into its own. First up, there's the characters. There's 9 people aboard the Serenity, all with their own unique personalities, goals and motivations, many of which conflict with each other at times, and their various perspectives and ideals are what form the backbone of Firefly's dramatic arc. There's Zoe, Malcolm's second in command and old war buddy who's always got his back, her husband Wash, the ship's talented but slightly flaky pilot, Kaylee, the engineer who somehow manages to keep the Serenity running despite all the punishment that it takes, Jane, a gun-toting meathead who's more interested in profit than teamwork, Book, a kind of travelling preacher with a mysterious past, Inara, a high-class escort who hitches a ride on the Serenity to get from job to job and has a will-they-won't-they relationship with Malcolm, and Simon and his sister River, who are on the run from the authorities while trying to reconnect with each other. And here's the thing, every single one of them is interesting, likeable, fleshed out and complex. You get a good sense of who everyone is and what matters to them within like the first half hour of the first episode, but the more you learn about them, the more layers of history and personality get built up. Watching them spark off each other, trading quips and insults, reacting to ideas and situations in different ways, and even just hanging out and having dinner together, it all just cements the realization that wow, they really did put a lot of thought into crafting these characters. And if you were to ask me who my favourite is, I genuinely struggle to answer because they all have something something to recommend them. Jane is hilarious with his simple-minded pursuit of profit and gratification, never passing up a chance to indulge himself, but there's also darker moments where he's actually forced to confront the fallout of his actions, and you can see how much it shakes him. Malcolm's the consummate leader, always cool under pressure, smart and calculating but also free-spirited and adventurous, willing to take risks with his ship and crew, but fanatically loyal to the people under his commands. And believe me, he is not a man to be trifled with if you turn against him. Holy shit, a smart, capable and brave male lead who's also respected by his crew? You can tell this show wasn't made today, that's for fucking sure. And he's played to absolute perfection by Nathan Fillion, who apparently considers Mal the best role of his career. And frankly, it's pretty tough to argue with it. Then there's Kaylee, who I genuinely think might be one of the most lovable characters I've ever seen on TV. She's a brilliantly talented engineer who can fix almost anything, but she's also feminine and endearing and, well, nice. Her quarters look like a teenage girl's bedroom, and in one episode where she's forced to wear a dress to attend a formal ball, she's delighted by the simple joy of just dressing up and looking pretty. If this was written today, she'd be some big burly lesbian with a crew cut and a bad attitude, obnoxiously complaining about how dumb the men around her are. We really did not appreciate how good we had it back in the day. But it's exactly this kind of nuanced character work, the ability to constantly surprise the viewer without ever feeling forced or mean-spirited, that helps to remind me that yes, Joss Whedon used to be really fucking good at this kind of thing. He gets a lot of flack nowadays for basically being the instigator of the cringe-inducing Marvel humour, and I've probably even done it myself, but I think that's doing the guy a disservice because most of the time, it's not really his work that's the problem, it's writers of lesser talent awkwardly trying to imitate him to the point of parody. Whedon himself once described this show as 9 people staring out into the darkness of space and seeing 9 different things, and really I think that's the perfect summation of what Firefly represents. It's a show about perspectives, different ideas and mindsets and how they conflict and work together. And of course, I can't talk about the characters without discussing the Serenity herself, which is basically the show's 10th character. She's a beat up old freighter, a bit like the Millennium Falcon, designed not just as a vehicle but as a home for the crew, and it has what I can only describe as a coziness to it that was so unique to that particular time in entertainment. Nowadays, most sets are designed to be dark and moody and cool, and they all come across as so stark and nondescript that they're almost depressing to look at. The Serenity is the exact opposite, cobbled together and lived in and rough and ready. There's little details and Easter eggs everywhere. The sets were all designed to connect together because Whedon really wanted the audience to know the layout of the ship and where everyone was at any given time, and it's this desire to create a usable, believable space that just adds to the feeling of a show that had a lot of love and care put into it. Obviously, not everything's going to hold up quite as well as the writing. This was a show made over 20 years ago on a not particularly big budget, so needless to say, the VFX are pretty janky by today's standards. There's a lot of recycled locations and props, many of the one and done sets look pretty bare bones, and sometimes the action set pieces are reaching for something that's a bit beyond their grasp. But you know what? I don't give a shit. I'd take a rough and ready show like this over some visually spectacular piece of soulless, corporatized trash any day of the fucking week. Ultimately, Firefly's unique fusion of sci-fi space adventure with big thematic overtones and down and dirty Wild West aesthetics with gunfights and bar brawls and old-timey dialogue was definitely a bold move from a creative standpoint, but in retrospect, it was probably a bit too far ahead of its time for people to really understand what it was going for. This problem, combined with a pretty crap time slot and a studio that never fully got behind it, meant that Firefly never found the audience that it deserved. Fan petitions and online campaigns eventually persuaded the studio to make Serenity, finally giving Whedon the budget and resources to bring his vision to life on the big screen, but even that wasn't enough to save the show, and it was consigned to history after just 14 episodes. And that truly does suck, because I feel like the whole history of this show was dogged by those 2 most terrible words. If only. If only the studio had gotten behind it more. If only idiots like me had been open-minded enough to give it a chance back in 2002. If only they'd stuck with it for another season. If only there hadn't been so much competition. If only. And when I think about all the absolute dogshit, brainless, soulless, pointless TV shows we get bombarded with today, that somehow keep getting renewed for season after season, that spend more on a single episode than Firefly got for its entire run, it makes me genuinely sad because little by little, we're losing that improvisational spirit and the creative drive that made shows like this possible in the first place. We really didn't appreciate how good we had it back then, and probably never will again, and ultimately, Firefly is just another sad example of wasted potential, of missed opportunities, of what might have been. So you know what, Firefly? On behalf of myself and everyone else who should have believed in you but didn't, I'm sorry. You deserve better than you got. And in the end, we're the ones who lost out. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.